It's the final day of the Hall Street exhibition. It's been opened every weekend for the past 3 months, and this has been the absolute highlight of our last day. This is a personal collection of two gentlemen I'm about to interview. To whom am I speaking to?
John Chapman.
John, you know a bit about this remarkable collection here, but first I'd like to pick on this beautiful photograph of the great man himself with a mustachioed gentleman.
This is a picture of Marconi with his right-hand man and assistant George Kemp. Kemp kept wonderful diaries which can be seen to this day, and they make a marvellous record of what went on day by day in the very early days of Marconi and his experiment. On the left-hand side here we've got the receiver, the coherer receiver. In its tin box in the photo, we've removed the tin box to show the inner workings. So this is the device that receives the signal from the distant station, and it operates the Morse Inca here, which is shown here in the picture.
A Morse Inca, is this to do with South Americans?
No, it's not that type of an Inca. This is an Inca with a K, and it prints out the Morse signal that's received on the receiver onto a paper tape. This is a clockwork mechanism, prints out onto the tape, and then as you can see in the picture, Marconi himself is reading the tape to see what's being sent.
Well, what is inked? Words, letters?
Morse code. So just as here, we've got Marconi spelt out on the tape in Morse code.
Tell me where Marconi is spelt out, please. Where's the M-A-R?
M is just here, dash dash, A-R-C-O-N-I. Then we start off with a V and we end with a V, which is what he usually did.
What does the V stand for?
It's just a test signal to say that he's starting or he's stopping transmission.
If you're spelling people out as they spell, that could take quite a bit of time. Wouldn't they refer to him as the boss?
No, he was referred to as Marconi, and this system was slow. It only operated at about 12 to 15 words a minute maximum, limited by the receiver and the Morse Inca itself.
But it certainly could get you out of trouble, and a lot better than a transatlantic cable under the water.
Indeed, it was wireless. There didn't have to be a wired link between the transmitter and the receiver.
In modern day terms, we hear the word wireless pronounced in its modern usage as Wi-Fi. Is Wi-Fi effectively another word for wireless?
Wi-Fi is wireless, yes, this is true, but it's a whole different ball game to this situation. In these days, there was usually only one transmission going on at once. Wi-Fi gives you hundreds, even thousands of transmissions all at once.
Okay, so there was somebody else at the end of this with a hand.
Yes. So this is the transmitting end. This is the
Is
key.
this what George Kemp is touching?
Yes, George Kemp is touching this in the picture, and this is where he's sending the Morse code signal. Very clumsily on this big Morse key. And this Morse key operates the spark coil, and this is the transmitter. So when this operates, there'd be a big spark between these two.
Would that be dangerous? Could you die?
Yes. They would certainly get a nasty nip from it if they touched it, yes.
Why wasn't it protected by glass, let's say?
This was before the days of health and safety.
Was it?
This was identical setup to what was used on the first ships.
What's the provenance of this equipment? Did this ever save lives, or has it always been, as it were, in a museum?
The date of this is 1901. This has come from various sources.
Just a minute, you've said 1901. This building in Hall Street was built in 1898, and it closed in 1912. So this could have been made here.
It's almost certain that this spark coil and this receiver were built in this very factory.
Why?
Because we know that this is a 1901 pattern of receiver, and this spark coil from its serial number can be dated to around about 1904, 1905.
Why have you got it? What's the background?
This equipment is kept in private collections, and this belongs to the collections of my friend Bob and myself.
Okay, now let me introduce the other half of this electronic duo.
I'm Bob Smallbone. Come from Bognor Regis. I've collected radio equipment, always been interested in it ever since I was a boy of about 2 years old. I was creeping from my mother's and father's bedroom into the attic, And in that attic there was a large wooden Tate and Lyle sugar box, and I lifted the lid, and inside I found a spark coil.
You found treasure.
I found treasure indeed.
And what was
X-ray
it?
tube.
What's a spark coil?
It was a smaller version of this. Device converts battery voltage into exceedingly high voltage. You put 16 volts into this piece of equipment and you'll get 25,000 volts for every inch of spark. So there's nearly a quarter of a million volts across.
So it will give you a terrific
when these are
throwback.
pulled out to 10 inches.
Really?
Oh, it'll throw you across the room. If you've got a pacemaker, it'll probably finish you off.
You've got a father who's got a very strange hobby, and he's collecting these things in a Tate and Lyle box for his son one day to find.
He was married, of course. At least I hope he was. He had this equipment as a boy. He was interested in electrical items. And of course, that was the day of make and mend. You had to make your own equipment. You couldn't go out and buy it. You could go to these people and buy one if you had the money, but far too expensive. He made his own coil, wound it himself. To drive an X-ray tube, I've still got the pictures of the X-ray pictures that he took of my mother's hand.
Hang on, he made an X-ray tube.
Sorry?
I mean, did he have a...
He made the X-ray equipment, didn't make the tube. He
No.
built the tube.
Okay, but to even make it, did he have a degree in electronics, or was he an amateur?
He was a printer,
A printer?
news printer.
Right. So that's
typesetter.
not exactly a qualification, is it?
Typesetter in those days. No, but in this box there was a wonderful book called The Boy Electrician, which I've still got. Very, very worn now, and it was my favourite book when I was a kid. I built all sorts of things out of it. Learnt a lot. Made batteries, made telephones, made shocking coils. Didn't get to make a spark coil. And it actually got to the stage in this book where there was a triode valve symbol printed in the back, which was saying, this is what's coming, the valve, the new technology. Well, unfortunately that technology is now evaporated. We're into semiconductors now. But
Good job he wasn't a rocket scientist. He'd be taken off in your back garden.
Yes.
So this childhood experience, what age do you say you were?
Oh, I think I was about 2.
You've got a memory of
It's
2. It
crawling
must
age.
have been incredible memory. I
I
mean,
was always trying to get back in there and get
Right.
this equipment in the box.
did he leave it to you eventually, and have you still got it?
No, my father, I love my father, of course, but he gave the equipment to the local school science lab. But I had the book, I had one of the spark coils, a small one, a professional one, and a few Leclanche cells, which were wet batteries in those days, gave 1.5 volts. But the prime, most important item was this wonderful book, The Boy Electrician. Still available if you hunt for it on the internet.
Incredible.
Several versions of it.
Incredible. How did you pal up with your the other part of the dynamic duo here? You both got this hobby. Were you selling and buying on eBay and suddenly decided let's do this together?
We met through the Vintage Wireless Society, the BVWS, British Vintage Wireless Society.
Right. And how did you meet at an open day, at a annual meeting?
We have swap meets, as they're called. It's where we get together and they're called swap meets, but they usually involve swapping money for old bits of tackle like this.
All right. So is it a good investment, or is it just the fact that it's what it is?
You know you're going to get your money back. Whether it's a good investment or not is probably an arguable matter, but I never regretted spending the money that I have spent on this equipment.
A lifelong hobby for
Yes.
both of you?
Oh yeah, Marconi is God. Well, almost.
Well, I have talked about that subject. Yeah. And these are his holy artifacts, as it were, really.
Yes.
What does it felt like today to be showing this off in the place, in the place where wireless started? Have you ever been this close to touching Marconi?
No, it's marvellous. We're treading in his footsteps. It's quite incredible to have the stuff in the factory where it was actually made, and a great pleasure to show it to so many people who've been so interested in it.
Why has it taken you so long to come to the to come to this factory. You passed it by on the other side of the road.
John told me about it last week. It's been running for 3 months. That's how badly news travels in our world.
But
Communication world, that's how badly news travels.
But it's a blessing in disguise, I think is the term,
yes, absolutely.
because you're able to come and lift us all with this. Because we thought that the Titanic replica, but here is the genuine Bedouin, and it's the actually made here. I will save my tears for later, but it's so moving. To think the last time these things were in here, these items were in here, was the year. What year do you suppose this?
Well, that's 1900.
1900.
It's a 1901 model, but it would have been built in 1900.
So,
the end of 1900.
So this place was up and running in 1899. So that's
1898. They moved in here.
Well, there's a bit of confusion about
bit of argument.
coming up for Christmas and it going over.
Okay.
But certainly, it's one of the first items made here. And was this the item you're saying that was made here?
Yes.
Yes, this was about 1904, 1905.
Yes.
All this equipment predates the Titanic exhibition by about 10 years.
Absolutely, and it was only the Titanic, as it were, that put the impetus to get wireless operators, radio operators, by law on every liner. And
Can I show you something?
Please.
I have that original photograph. This is a photocopy. I have that original photograph, and it's quite exciting to be able to put your hand there and know that's where the master's had his hand.
Right. That's exciting. Well, I'm going to tell you this, and I'm moving down to your feet. What do you think about that? That we are walking in his footsteps.
Absolutely.
We have actually lost this building and it will become apartments. Does that grieve your soul?
It's one of the biggest sins of modern time, I would have thought. And whatever decision's been made to turn it into something else urgently needs reversing. I don't know how we go about that, but it has to happen.
Perhaps you might have to sell each item here. We might be able to raise 380,000.
Well, is that what we need? 380,000.
Only 300. The price of a house, of a terraced house in Chelmsford. Only 380,000.
One house. It's a bargain.
Peanuts.
It's a bargain. If I didn't have to discuss this with my other half, I'd probably vote to sell my house and live in a car.
What do you think?
I think it's a travesty that they can't raise such a small sum of money to turn this into a museum.
It's only £380,000. I mean,
Don't shout about
it's
it too
nothing.
much, 'cause somebody might put it up.
Well, I'm surprised that somebody actually hasn't really thought about why don't we buy it? I mean, certainly, if you bought it as an investment, you kept them. You bought it; it's yours, and you've just got it on a peppercorn rent. We pay the rents and rates.
Let's sell Marconi shares.
Well, the last
Who's
time
to
they did,
stop it?
who would buy a Marconi share?
All right.
Is there anything?
Marconi 2016 shares then?
Yes.
How about that?
Yes. And if anyone's got any of those other shares, they probably use them as loo paper. But what about, what haven't I asked you about this marvellous collection and this whole thing? Is there anything you'd like to add before we go? Have we said it all?
I think it's the disbelief of people when they see it.
Come on, he's still on heat. Go on. What would you like to say that I haven't asked about?
I love looking at their face. The face of one. This is a radio set. Is it? Doesn't look like a radio set. Can you tell me how it works? And you try to tell them how it just goes over the head.
You mean one little switch that goes like that in Hilversum? They've never heard of Hilversum.
No, well, also, yes, of course. That's quite a long way down the road. Everybody today thinks of radio being DAB, FM, stereo. This equipment, would not be able to decode any of those signals. This equipment worked on continuous wave signals only. The raw rasp of a spark discharge. And you could only transmit and read Morse with it.
That's why we were able to read with the Enigma their signals, but they couldn't read our signals?
Oh, well, they could get our signals, but they couldn't make any sense of them. Arguably, Guglielmo is the guy who's changed our life. he's had the greatest effect on the way of life, and people don't realise it. We've got we've got control of missions deep into space. We've got all our social media, our mobile phones. You can't do that with ours. Mobile phones. It's all down to understanding and controlling radio waves.
Over to you.
He had the vision to make it a practical reality, and he had the vision to use it for commercial purposes, which other scientists at the time didn't have. And it's just incredible how far it's got in 100 years.